Eleanor Price had always believed holidays were held together by intention. Not love alone, not tradition by itself, but intention, the deliberate choice to show up, to cook too much food, to set the table even when no one seemed to notice. For 35 years as a public school teacher in Philadelphia, Eleanor had taught children that effort mattered even when applause didn't come right away. Now, at 70, retired and widowed, she still lived by that rule. Mother's Day fell on a Sunday that year, warm but not yet summer soft. The kind of day that made the row house streets smell faintly of lilacs and car exhaust. Eleanor had been awake since 6, moving quietly through the narrow kitchen of the home she'd lived in for 4 decades, tying her gray hair back with a ribbon she'd owned longer than her youngest child had been alive. She checked her list again, though she already knew it by heart. Roast chicken with herbs. Mashed potatoes whipped with sour cream. Asparagus with lemon. A strawberry shortcake cooling on the counter, the berries macerating slowly in sugar the way her own mother had taught her. Everything planned. Everything prepared with care. The dining room table was set with the good dishes, the ones she rarely used anymore because, "There's no point just for me," as she often said, though the words always landed heavier than she meant. Cloth napkins folded neatly. Candles waiting to be lit. Cards she bought for herself to give them later, a habit she told herself was practical rather than sad. At 10:30, she texted her 3 children in the group chat they still shared out of habit. "Can't wait to see you today. Dinner at 5. Her eldest daughter, Melissa, replied with a heart emoji. Her son, Brian, sent a thumbs up. The youngest, Kevin, didn't respond. Eleanor smiled anyway and went back to the kitchen. She had raised them here, in this house. Taught them spelling at the kitchen table. Helped with science projects that spilled glue onto the floor. Stayed up late sewing costumes and early grading papers. When her husband died suddenly of a heart attack 15 years earlier, she had held herself together because someone had to. She had told herself it was temporary. She would rest later. Later, it turned out, came very quietly. At noon, her phone rang. Melissa's name lit up the screen. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Melissa said, cheerful but rushed. "Thank you, sweetheart," Eleanor said. "You on your way soon?" There was a pause. "About that. Brian just called. They're all at this lake house outside the city. Friends of his. It's kind of turned into a thing." Eleanor's hand tightened around the phone. "A thing?" "Yeah, we thought we told you." "No," Eleanor thought. "You didn't. So you're not coming for dinner?" she asked. "Well, not for dinner," Melissa said gently. "But we'll swing by later. After. We promise." Eleanor stared at the chicken roasting in the oven, skin crisping just right. "Oh," she said. "All right." They hung up quickly, with reassurances that felt light and flimsy. Eleanor stood in the kitchen for a long moment, then turned off the stove. She wrapped the food carefully, as if doing so might preserve the meaning behind it. She ate alone that evening, a small plate, sitting at the end of the table instead of the head. The candles remained unlit. Outside, laughter floated in from neighboring houses where families gathered in visible clusters, kids darting between adults like sparks. At 8:30, headlights swept across her living room window. Brian knocked loudly, the way he always had. "Mom," he called. "You still awake?" They came in smelling of sunscreen and beer and something sweet she couldn't place. Kevin hugged her too tightly. Melissa kissed her cheek and apologized again, quickly, as if speed might erase the sting. "Sorry we're late," Brian said. "But hey, we need to talk to you about something." Eleanor's stomach dropped. They sat at the kitchen table, chairs scraping loudly against the floor. Brian leaned forward, elbows planted, expression earnest. "So, Brian's car finally died," Melissa said, nodding toward her brother. "And the rates right now are insane." Kevin chimed in. "We just need a little help with the down payment. You know we'd pay you back." Eleanor looked at them, one by one. Her children. Grown. comfortable. Unaware. How much, she asked. They told her. The number felt unreal in her mouth. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Relief washed over their faces too quickly. As they left, Kevin's phone buzzed. He laughed and said, "Group chat's blowing up." Eleanor watched them go, then picked up her phone, curious despite herself. She had taught technology long enough to know how easily mistakes were made. Kevin had sent the message to the wrong thread. She read it once. Then again. She'll cave. She always does. Mother's Day guilt is undefeated. Easiest money we'll ever get. Eleanor set the phone down carefully. She did not cry. She cleaned the kitchen. Washed the dishes she hadn't needed. Packed leftovers into containers she labeled with dates that would never matter. Later that night, she sat in her armchair, hands folded, and stared at the wall where her students' thank you notes used to hang. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor Price did not ask herself what she had done wrong. She asked herself what she was still doing here. Eleanor slept poorly that night, not because she was upset in the way people expected upset to look, but because her mind had finally gone quiet enough to hear a truth she'd been avoiding for years. She woke before dawn and lay still, listening to the city breathe. A delivery truck groaned somewhere down the block. A siren wailed briefly and faded. The house made its familiar sounds, the soft tick of cooling pipes, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Everything was the same. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. By mid-morning, she was sitting at the small desk in her spare bedroom, the one that still held stacks of old lesson plans and red pens dried to uselessness. She opened a yellow legal pad and wrote a single word at the top. Enough. It wasn't anger that guided her pen. It was clarity. She began listing what she owned. The house, paid off years ago. The modest savings she'd built by living carefully. Her teacher's pension. The furniture that had once been chosen to survive children, not to please her. Boxes of photographs she hadn't opened since her husband's funeral. Everything she'd kept just in case. Just in case of what, she wondered now. The phone rang mid-morning. Brian. "Hey, Mom," he said, warm and casual. "Any thoughts about last night?" Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "I've been thinking," she said, truthfully. "Great," he said. "Because we're kind of on a timeline." "I'll get back to you," she replied, and hung up before he could fill the silence. She spent the rest of the day moving through the house differently. Not nostalgically. Assessing. She opened closets and drawers she hadn't touched in years. She stacked books she knew she'd never reread. She wrapped fragile items with care, not because she was afraid of breaking them, but because she respected what they had once meant. By Tuesday, she had called a real estate agent. "I'm not in a rush," Eleanor said during their meeting. "But I am serious." The agent, a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and a calm demeanor, nodded. "That usually means you're more ready than you think." Eleanor smiled. "I've been ready for a long time. I just didn't know it." Word traveled quickly once the for sale sign went up. Melissa called first, confused. "You're selling the house?" she asked. "Why?" "I don't need it anymore," Eleanor said. "But that's home." "It was," Eleanor replied. "It served its purpose." Kevin called next, angry this time. "You're being dramatic," he said. "This is about the money thing, isn't it?" "It's about a lot of things," Eleanor said evenly. Brian didn't call at all. The house sold within weeks. A young couple with a toddler toured it twice and made an offer Eleanor accepted without negotiation. She liked the way the child toddled through the hallway, touching the walls as if memorizing them. Packing was easier than she expected. Letting go always was, once you stopped asking permission. She donated clothes to shelters. Gave books to the library. Sold furniture that no longer fit the life she imagined ahead. Each item that left the house made the rooms feel larger, lighter. She met with an attorney on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "I want to update my will," Eleanor said, folding her hands neatly in her lap. The attorney raised an eyebrow. "Anything specific?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "I want to fund scholarships for single mothers returning to school." The attorney smiled softly. "Any particular reason?" Eleanor thought of her students over the years. Girls who disappeared mid-semester. Women who sat in the back row, exhausted but determined. "They work harder than anyone notices," she said. "Someone should notice." When her children found out, the panic arrived exactly as she'd expected. They showed up at the house together, standing in the empty living room like trespassers. "Where's everything?" Melissa asked, voice cracking. "Gone," Eleanor said simply. "You can't just disappear," Brian said. "We're your family." Eleanor looked at him, really looked. The boy she'd taught to ride a bike. The man who laughed at her behind her back. "I'm not disappearing," she said. "I'm living." The bus ticket sat folded in her purse the morning she left. One way. Philadelphia to a small town in Vermont she'd circled on a map weeks earlier. She'd chosen it for no reason other than the way it looked surrounded by green. She locked the door for the last time without ceremony. The bus ride was long and quiet. Eleanor watched cities give way to trees, concrete dissolving into hills. She felt lighter with every mile. When she arrived, the air smelled different. Clean. Like rain and pine. She rented a small cabin on the edge of town with a porch and wide windows. It wasn't fancy. It was enough. On her first afternoon, she walked to the local library. The building was small, brick, welcoming. Inside, a woman about her age smiled. "New here?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "I think so." The woman extended her hand. "Welcome. We're always happy to have more readers." Eleanor smiled back, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Belonging, she realized, didn't have to hurt. Eleanor learned the rhythm of the Vermont village slowly, the way you learn a language by listening before you speak. Mornings began with light spilling through the cabin windows, softer than the sharp glare of Philadelphia dawns. She brewed coffee and drank it on the porch, wrapped in a sweater even in late spring, watching mist lift off the trees like something being forgiven. No traffic. No sirens. Just birds negotiating with the day. She bought a small set of paints in town after spotting them in the window of a general store. They weren't expensive, and the brushes felt unfamiliar in her hands, but something in her chest loosened when she carried them back to the cabin. She sat up near the window and began with simple things, the curve of the hills, the way shadows gathered under trees, the quiet patience of barns standing exactly where they had stood for decades. At the library, she became a regular. Tuesday afternoons turned into book club meetings where conversations wandered easily from novels to life. No one asked her what she used to be. They asked what she was reading, what she thought, whether she wanted to join them for coffee afterward. She did. The friendships came without effort. A retired nurse who laughed loudly and unapologetically. A widower who carved wooden birds and donated them to the children's section. A young librarian finishing her degree while raising a toddler on her own. Eleanor listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, people leaned in. Her children called more often at first, their voices sharp with fear and confusion. "Where are you staying?" Melissa asked one night. "I'm safe," Eleanor said. "When are you coming back?" Brian demanded another time. "I'm not," Eleanor replied, gently. The calls grew less frequent. Less urgent. Eventually, they became something else, updates instead of demands. Questions instead of accusations. Eleanor answered when she wanted to. She didn't explain herself anymore. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the scholarship fund she'd established. The first recipient had been chosen. A single mother of two, returning to school to finish her teaching degree. Eleanor sat at the small wooden table in her cabin and cried then, quietly. Not from sadness. From recognition. She had not disappeared. She had multiplied. Summer settled fully into the valley. Eleanor's paintings improved, not because she pushed herself, but because she enjoyed the time spent trying. Her porch filled with flowers she planted without worrying how long they'd last. At the library, she volunteered to help adults studying for certification exams, slipping easily back into the role of teacher, but on her own terms. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, she realized she had gone an entire day without thinking about her children at all. The thought didn't bring guilt. It brought peace. She wrote them a letter later that week. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just a note. I love you. I am happy. I hope one day you understand that those two things can exist together. She mailed it without rereading. On a crisp autumn morning, Eleanor stood outside her cabin with a fresh canvas, painting the trees as they burned red and gold. A neighbor waved from across the dirt road. Someone called her name. Eleanor smiled, lifting her brush. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. She had arrived.